We will have some time for questions, Q&A session after the panel. So think about some questions that you may have for Dr. Saikawa, and then I'm sure she has a plethora of information that she can say too. So, but at this time, we want to start our panel discussion. We heard about what academia is doing and what the science is behind sustainability. So let's learn about what the public and private sector is doing as well. So when I call your name up, if you can come up and sit in one of these cool captain chairs. But first, let's get Dr. Tony Brown back up. He's the research economist and senior advisor here at the Federal Reserve Bank. Next, we have Mr. Bill Strang, President of Corporate Strategy, E-Commerce, and Customer Care at Toto USA. And last but not least, all the way from New York, we have Ms. Miho Tabaru. She is a sustainability fashion consultant. So what are some of the environmental and human costs historically seen in the manufacturing industry that Toto has tried to reverse in its business operations?
Hi, so obviously Toto, you may know, is a manufacturer of toilets. This was not close. And in the manufacturing process of making toilets, there's a lot of consumption of resources that we use. Now, we have a manufacturing facility located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's actually just south of the airport, and we've got 40 nationalities and 7 languages that we speak in that factory. Part of the processes that we use in the manufacturing of our product is actually measuring the carbon footprint of the products that are being produced by Toto. We measure the carbon footprint to actually identify how much carbon is consumed in the production, mining, and distribution in the marketplace, but to also measure how much carbon is consumed in the use of water. Now, water is a very important part of our business. We use 4 million gallons of water at our factory to produce toilets. But we've actually converted that from fresh water to now fully recycled water in the vast majority of the applications where we use water in our factories. So we've been able to mitigate that. And in fact, we get our water from Clayton County, we give it back to them cleaner than we got it from them because it has too much iron in it. We can't use it with a lot of iron. But the manufacturing of our toilets allows us to understand not only the carbon footprint in the manufacturing, but also how much energy is used when it's used in your home. And just to be clear, when you actually use a toilet, every gallon of water has an embedded energy content of 0.0037 kilowatt hours per gallon of water. Now that is important because those kilowatts are key to success. And the work that we do is to help reduce the overall carbon consumption by bringing down the consumption of water. And so when you flush your toilet and you're using a Toto low-flow toilet, you are saving the planet. You're doing your little bit to make sure we're going to be successful. Now that's important because we now have all of those employees, those 40 nationalities and 7 languages, many first-generation Americans who are deeply involved in making those products and actually provide an opportunity for them to have a level of pride and enthusiasm about the ethic that Toto has with the work that they're doing.
All right, thank you very much. So from toilets to something a little bit maybe more beautiful, fashion, right? So Miho-san, you represent the fashion industry, and for outsiders kind of looking in, we see all the kind of the beautiful kind of glitzy, kind of very popular things in pop culture too. But what are some harmful environmental costs and maybe some human costs within the fashion industry that people may not be aware of?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Hi, good. Oh, okay, there you go. So fashion industry is actually the second largest polluting industry in the world in terms of the carbon emissions. And the fashion industry is responsible for about like 6 to 8% of the carbon emissions. And of course, like carbon emission leads global warming and also the animal extinctions and a lot of environmental issues. So yeah, definitely the fashion industry has a lot of problems. And currently until now, very recently, fashion industry has the linear models, which is the take, make, dispose model. So we use a lot of resources and emit a lot of carbons and use waters and chemicals, a lot of harmful like things. And so we really have to change the linear models to circular models. Because like even though we are taking a lot of resources, 85% of the total apparel production has been like going into landfill. And there has been a lot of innovations of recycling fibers, for example, like fiber-to-fiber technologies, but it's only still like 1% of the recycled fibers becomes fiber again. So yeah, so that would like certainly a lot of responsibility like the fashion industry has and causing a lot of issues.
Great, thank you. So we talked about manufacturing and fashion, and I think there's a lot on sustainability that certainly the manufacturing, Saikawa Sensei talked about agriculture and transportation industries can work on, but service industries certainly I think is a major kind of player as well. And Tony, you mentioned we are at a bank. The bank of all banks, right? So what is the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta here where we are today? What are you all doing to kind of promote sustainability in your activities?
Yeah, so it may be useful to just start out and say, what is our bread and butter activities? So the Federal Reserve System, which consists of the Board of Governors and regional banks, throughout the country, and it is founded with the idea that the regional bank should represent their community. And so we help conduct monetary policy. Our president votes on interest rates. We supervise banks in our districts, so that's part of the community activity, is making sure that the banking system is run, functions well in our district. And we also maintain a payment system, but our Board of Governors are members of the community. And so an important part of what we do is reach out to the community, have contact with the community, share information we have with the community. And our community economic development department here, they're tasked with pretty much full-time providing information to the community, and an important part of that information that they provide relates to issues such as the lead issue that came up in Atlanta. This is important information that we want the community to know about. There are other issues that were discussed as well. We have a job occupations tool here that we've developed. And what that tool allows you to do is, suppose that you're a dishwasher and you want to be a materials engineer. What are you going to give up in terms of the safety net, and what are you going to pay to change that occupation? So we use this tool to kind of understand what the costs and benefits are of different types of career changes. Okay. So in terms of the specific topic, what we've tried to do to start with in terms of sustainability, we've tried to start with making our building, reducing the imprint, the environmental imprint of our activities in this building on carbon output, for instance. And so we've reduced use of water by about 46%, and use of energy by 56%, not just in this building, but throughout the districts. So we have regional branches. So on that, that's the first thing we've done. We've tried to reduce our imprint ourselves. And then there are a number of other things we do. Employees benefit from subsidized travel if they use public transportation. So we try to encourage people to take public transportation by offering subsidies on the ticket price. A big activity, we're actually a small factory. And what we do, we receive currency, and you probably saw these little plastic bags, but the currency that's worn out, we shred, and And because Miami is in our district, we get a lot of currency coming from Latin America that needs to be shredded because it's all worn out. And so what we've done is it used to be just thrown in the garbage dump to shred the currency, and we've migrated from that to now it's burned or it's used as compost in New Orleans. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, I'm currently working on launching a sustainable apparel brands in Japan market, and I have done a lot of like focus group researches, mainly focusing on like talking and asking questions to younger generations, Generation X. No, sorry, Generation Z. Yes, and then I found out a lot like big differences between like Japanese consumers and also US consumers. So before I talk about like the company's sustainable initiative differences, I want to talk about their mindset are different. So I see a lot of like US consumers are purpose-driven purchase behaviors. So they really care about what the brands are doing, what the companies are doing, how the products are made. But like when we ask the consumers in Japan, of course, like if we ask them, do you care about the sustainability? Then a lot of people say yes, but without saying the sustainability, and then when we ask the question to them, what is the priority of making a purchase decisions? And then no words around the sustainability comes out from their mouth. So they care about like functionality, price, design, and yeah, how versatile. We're asking about the back question, how versatile they can use the bag in their daily life. So their mindset is completely different, and they're not totally like purpose-driven consumers. So that's the biggest difference in terms of mindset. And of course, the companies are like influenced by the consumer's mindset. So the US companies, if they don't work on the sustainable initiatives, then consumers don't choose the products.
For example, the carbon footprint of a toilet, I can tell you the ecotoxicity, the effication characteristics, the carbon emissions output, how much smog is, I can tell you those characteristics intimately by each number. It's wonky, but what is important about this is, just as was mentioned, this characteristic of ESG is becoming more and more important. And we know that over the last 7 years, as an example, millennials have been the single largest acquirer of mortgages. They're making their decision because millennials have a very unique characteristic as a demographic. They're typically dual income, they're very ethnically diverse, they have an opportunity of being very socially conscious, and we want to make sure that we can actually tell a story that's not just, let me tell you a pretty story, let me tell you a story, let me show you the results of our calculations and the verification of that story. So important.
Great. Tony, you spoke about some of the sustainability initiatives and activities you're doing here in Atlanta. What are other districts doing? I know, different banks in the Federal Reserve System have different board of directors and things like that, so how do we compare with others?
Yeah, so as I pointed out, that we have the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., and then we have regional banks here in Atlanta, Dallas, Minnesota, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Kansas City. I could keep going on, that's not all of them. But each regional bank has its own president and its own board of directors. And then consequently, each regional bank has its own position on these issues. And so by visiting the webpage of the regional banks, you'll see what their positions are. We know that California has taken the forefront of many of these issues, and you can see that this seems to be reflected in the San Francisco Fed's views, because they've given a lot of thought to this issue, and you'll find quite a bit of detail on the various initiatives. So there's going to be regional variation, just because institutionally we're set up to represent our community in our district. There's another element to this, though, and that is that we're bound together by the Federal Reserve System. We're all in the Federal Reserve System, and Chairman Powell has said very clearly, absent congressional legislation, we are not a climate policymaker. Okay, So it would be inappropriate for us to use our monetary policy or supervisory tools to promote a greener economy or to achieve these other climate-based goals absent congressional, explicit congressional legislation. So what do we do instead? We don't have the congressional authority to set policy for these issues. So instead, we do two things. We produce information, we produce research that we disseminate to communities and academic circles and to businesses. The other thing that we're doing right now is we have a voluntary initiative where we've had 6 of the biggest financial institutions in this country cooperate with the Federal Reserve to do a scenario analysis. And that scenario analysis is a long-run projection of how would these climate change scenarios impact your business operations. And so we're not setting policy, but we are actively trying to produce information to learn about how climate change, climate risks could influence the biggest financial institutions in the country.
Great, thank you. Back to Miho-san. So we talked about how the fashion industry is starting to take sustainability more seriously, and you talked about consumers in Japan and the U.S. Have you seen big changes in the materials being used in the production of apparel, and how does the materials used in Japan and the U.S. differ?
Yes. The materials that the apparel companies have been using has been changed, but the point here is like we can't only talk about the materials, and this is actually, when we talk about the whole sustainable fashion, and this is actually the biggest the companies difference between Japan and US was being focused. So I see a lot of Japanese fashion companies, they only focus on the part of supply chain. So for example, only trying to change the materials from just newly created materials to recycled materials such as recycled polyesters. Or they keep the linear models and then they are just place the recycled box at the store and then they are just trying to look like they are working on the sustainability and trying to collect the waste or the unwanted clothes from the customers, but actually the company doesn't know where those clothes gonna go, or they don't take responsibility of the waste itself. So a lot of Japanese apparel companies are just like that. But in here, US, I see a lot of apparel companies are trying to change the models from linear to circular model. So whole supply chain or whole value chains, they are trying to change into more sustainable systems. So for example, design process, it is that 80% of the environmental impacts during the life cycle of the products are decided by design process. So what they have been changing is they think the design process backwards to minimize the waste. So when they decide the design, for example, they think about how they can easily repair by creating a modular system of the apparel. So if you're wearing the shirts and it's easily worn out this around the sleeve area. But if the products are made out of just a modular system, you can just replace this sleeve area. So that's one example. They're working on the whole supply chain from the design perspective. And also another thing that I want to mention here is they're changing the system. So I want to introduce about the concept of the PaaS, P-A-A-S, that stands for Products as a Service. So you have been probably seeing more and more rental services or subscription services or resale services a lot of companies are working on. So the product ownership are changing from consumers to the company. So the companies keep the product ownership by themselves, and then once they create one product, they can keep making the sales or the profitability from just one product by circulating that one product. So that's the differences that I see.
Well, speaking of fashion, and this kind of applies to you, Bill, too. E-commerce and online shopping are huge right now, right? So, so maybe Miho-san first. How has online shopping and e-commerce how has it affected the fashion industry in terms of sustainability? And then, Bill, same thing with you too. How does people buying toilets online affect sustainability?
Yeah, this question is kind of like, I was thinking about it, and I don't know if it's like, online, yeah, or maybe like I can talk about the return system. We were just like talking about it before. So the people started shopping more and more online, and then return more and more products, and returning a lot of products to the warehouse is a big issue in terms of sustainability, because they have to, check the product, and then if it's like, still sellable, then they will allocate those products into like each stores or the like e-commerce warehouses so that they can resell it again. But it takes a long time to be able to do that. So a lot of return products cannot be able to sell. So it's actually like increasing more sustainable issues, I would say.
More waste there is too,
Yeah.
right? So, toilets, yes.
Yeah. The online experience, you wouldn't think people are buying toilets online. They're buying toilets online. They're buying washes online. It's unbelievable. And we've had over the past couple of years several big moments of serendipity, and I want to say that because we began our e-commerce journey 7 years ago, right? We began to build that e-commerce platform because we knew that consumers today are primarily doing 90% of their searches for a product on their mobile device. They're looking at ideas and looks, and they're talking to their friends. They're going on Instagram and Facebook and sharing those ideas. And hey, should I buy this? Should I buy that? They look at the reviews online and see what the cohorts. I mean, it used to be the plumber recommended our product. Now it's the cohort someone who's already bought one of the products and left a review who's making the recommendation or not the recommendation of our particular product. But what's so interesting is the online, if we had not been in an online platform, and sustainability is a bit of a challenge here because we produce a washlet. A washlet helps you reduce the consumption of toilet paper. That's a good thing, right? And when you can do that, that means the poor toilet paper companies, nothing against Georgia Pacific, just down the road here, but they are actually reducing the amount of toilet paper that they sell. That's important. But here's where that serendipity came in. If we all remember 3 years ago, right before the Fed just locked the doors, it was March 2020 that COVID hit and we had the lockdown. And what became really interesting was during that pandemic, suddenly everyone had to buy milk, bread, and toilet paper. And they bought so much toilet paper that it was gone in about 4 days, 10 days on average. And suddenly they were looking for alternatives. And Toto, the bidet product, became on Amazon the 15th most searched item after gloves, masks, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer. And we had a lot of bidets, and we sold a crazy amount of bidets over those next couple of weeks until we ran out entirely in the United States. It raised the level of awareness in the marketplace so strongly that it's become now it became something like, a bidet was sort of this unique Japanese thing, but now it's something that's actually very common in terms. But every bidet we sold, we know that we're reducing the use of toilet paper and giving the opportunity to not have that energy consumption in that process be part of the overall impact of the product.
All right, great. So we talked about what's happening before and today. So let's finish out by the future. So Miho-san, what's the future of the fashion industry? What new innovations are happening? Did you see that you think brands will be implementing in the future to really combat climate change or kind of sustainability issues that we have today?
Sure. I would like to mention two things. And one thing is from maybe like technology standpoint of view, and I'm really interested in the traceability of the product productions. Like blockchain technologies, now a lot of companies are able to start tracking where the resources are taken, or where the products are manufactured, and where the products are sold, how the consumers are treated, and how they are recycled. And those like, blockchain or the innovation, blockchain or like technology innovations has been developed because, for example, like Europe, UK is implementing regulation called like, so that all the products that they are sold in the Europe market, they have to add the digital product passport, which has all the information of all of the product of what I just said. So it is becoming a like must for the companies to be able to trace, and there is a technology that's have been developed to be able to do that. So that's one thing that I'm saying, like from a technology standpoint of view in terms of innovation. And another thing here is it's not innovation, but I think the role of the brand has been changing. And it used to be just the brand are the company, the brands are manufacturing a good products and then sell at the store, the online, and then once they hand it over to consumers, then they didn't care. I mean, they couldn't track what's going on about the products. But now the role of the brand has been not only that kind of like just how do you say, those functionality, but also becoming a hub or the platform of the community of the same mindset. So there is a new startup brand called Another Tomorrow, which I really like. That's really like small brand, but they are so they are holding a lot of like seminars at the store to educate the customers about the sustainable fashions, and also they are, so once, if you go see the Another Tomorrow's website, you can actually sign up for the petitions to change or to create the regulation, for example, like, the ban of the one-time usage plastic or those kind of things. So people have the same mindset, can go to those brands and gather, and then through those brands, they can take actions. So the role of the brands are changing. Yeah.
Wow, very interesting. So for Toto, what's the future of toilets to kind of combat sustainability issues?
This is, well, one of the important things that we're doing in our production of our products is not only reducing the overall carbon footprint, but we've actually added some feature sets into the product that are quite unique. As an example, we have actually put into some of our toilets, a couple that DJ Khaled got as a gift from his buddy Drake over his birthday on Black Friday last year. But another funny story. But the funny thing about this product it's a NeoRest. It's a unitized toilet and bidet functionality. It has an ultraviolet light in the lid of the seat. The glaze coating inside the bowl is a titanium dioxide coating that is both photocatalytic and hydrophilic. That means it is water loving. That means the water sheets and doesn't cause a drip or a spot, kind of like what you want to have with your wine glasses in the dishwasher. But in addition to that, every night for about 20 minutes, the ultraviolet light comes on, shines onto the inside surface of that bowl, and helps break down and decompose materials that might still be residual on the exposed surface. That's cool. And we also have added in something called e-water. Electrolyzed water is a very common technique used in the food industry. We actually generate electrolyzed water from the potable water that comes into the back of your toilet. Potable water has a small bit of sodium and has some chlorine in it. We run it through the electrolysis process, strike an arc, and create electrolyzed water that we spray into the bowl after every use. Who thinks of this stuff, right? It's actually cleaning your bowl. If you kind of smell it smells chlorine-y. It's because we actually created chlorine and sprayed it into the bowl. These are the kinds of innovations that we believe are going to be important for the future of our industry, because what we're doing now is making that product safer, more hygienic, and self-cleaning. So not only does it clean you, but it cleans itself. And this is what we think is going to be an important part of the future of our industry.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause. You all can stay seated. I'm open up for questions from the audience. Just a few questions. We don't have too much time, as we do have a optional tour of the Federal Reserve Bank after this. But if there's any questions for any of the panelists, or Saikawa Sensei, please raise your hand and I'll come around with a microphone.
I have a question for Mr. Strong. You mentioned about Hartsfield-Jackson success story. Oh, by the way, my parents had a new rest. Hartsfield-Jackson is a big project, but are you doing anything currently in the more smaller office buildings or residential high-rises popping up a lot in Midtown? Are you doing any system that installing in the system in the building to purify the water and things like that?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for being a neorest advocate. The water treatment system that we have at our factory, 3 to 4 million gallons a month is being processed. It is post-industrial gray water. So it is not black water. Black water is human waste or waste from your sink, garbage disposal. So we only process that and do that internally at Toto. What is also important is at Hartsfield Airport, they're primarily dealing with black water, although we have helped them mitigate their challenges with using recycled water for wash down of the jets, especially during the time, in the wintertime when they're doing de-icing operations. But as a sidebar, I've also been asked to go to many locations, up to and including the San Francisco Salesforce Tower, to advise and to provide support for their internal recycled water system in the Salesforce Tower in the basement. They're capturing all their gray water and all their black water and recycling it on site inside the basement of the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco and repurposing it back up into flushing toilets and urinals.
Great. Ms. Ramona?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ramona Houston. I really enjoyed this presentation today. I'm a social impact strategist, and one of the things that Professor Saikawa talked about was the 3 pillars of sustainability, one being social sustainability. So my question to the professor, I know you talked a lot about environment, but what can businesses do more to advance social sustainability?
Thank you so much for that question. I think there was a discussion about greenwashing. So how can companies be more working with the community? I think Tony was mentioning about how Fed works with the community, but how I think they would have better answers to how they can do that. But I feel with the collaboration with different stakeholders might be the way, because we can all share the information together and then that would be more meaningful. That would be my guess. But I would love to hear from the company perspective about how you are working with the communities, and then maybe Tony over.
Yeah, thank you. So, and to that point, Toto has a very significant ESG program. Our SDG goals are clearly defined on our corporate website, and we have many, many examples of the characteristics and attributes of those SDGs and the ESG attributes. Part of that overall goal is to make sure that we are doing as much as we possibly can to advance opportunities to engage in community aspects, in environmental, and social, and in governance. But what's really interesting is, back in 2021, the Wall Street Journal actually rated Toto one of the 75th most sustainable company in the world. Now that's a nice accolade to get, but that comes as a result not only of doing the work, but also sharing the message of doing the work. And so I would say the most important thing to do is do the work, do good work, but then tell the story of your good work. and share that with those who are interested. Because you don't know what is going to trigger that consumer to make that choice. If we get the opportunity to engage a consumer in a discussion about sustainability, we're going to kill them every time. We're going to get them every time, right? Because we want to win their hearts. And the way to win people's hearts, good quality, great price, but also how are you running your business to be sustainable in the long term.
All right, got one last question from Mr. Travis Jethro.
Just a really quick question. First of all, I love the panel. But as I was sitting here, and I wrote this down just so I would get it right, I see there's kind of a disconnect between the initiatives from a company versus, what the consumer wants. And Neil's on top about this. And I just wonder, to what extent is sustainability kind of the purview of people on the higher end of the income spectrum? How are companies addressing that piece? If I want a Chanel jacket instead of fast fashion, am I prepared to spend $3,000 for that knowing that it's sustainable? Is it sexy to be sustainable versus really being sustainable? Toilets are great, and I love toilets, but they're not cheap, right? So if from the presentation we saw, we talk about the people that are being impacted the most, they're not available or able to spend all of that on sustainability. So how are companies really addressing that is kind of what I wanted to know.
From Total standpoint, we have a full range of product pricing, from entry level all the way up. I mean, you can go to Costco today, and for $300, you can put a wash it into your life. You can also put a toilet in your life for $185. So it's not insurmountable. But what we also find is part of the zeitgeist of the moment is how the influencers are projecting the aspirational aspect of our product. Funny little story. DJ Khaled had a birthday last year on Black Friday, right? He's got his buddy Drake. Drake provided him as a gift 4 of our most expensive Neorest toilets as a gift. DJ was so jacked and excited about it that he went on to social media, and he's got 31 million followers on Instagram. He told the story on Black Friday. On Saturday, right, local Saturday, our website blew up and people were looking for all kinds of things related to Toto. But what was interesting was after DJ put that into the ecosystem, into the ether, it went around the world amongst the hip hop and rap community. There was 1.3 billion impressions of that story around the world. How does that happen? And if you were to watch South Park last week, they had an episode in South Park about the Japanese toilets at Home Depot. It's like right? So it's a wonderful opportunity to be aspirational is key. Because we also are able, through our aspirational products, bring our newest technology, our newest innovations that are sometimes not ready for, the everyday product, but we then begin to migrate that technology down through the entire portfolio. So this is really important, I think, about how you have a balanced portfolio of product offerings from the very beginning to the entry level, all the way up to the DJs and Drakes on the board.
Thank you, brilliant panel, for a wonderful discussion and a great keynote presentation as well. It's nice to be up here. Nice to be down here from Washington, D.C., where I recently landed, and to say a few words as an ostensible co-organizer of today's program. I say ostensible because I've been on the job, as Yoshi said, new. I'm not quite at my 4-week anniversary, so I can take absolutely no credit for the program, but it's delightful to inherit a kind of network and partnerships that make this sort of gathering possible year in and year out. So maybe just a couple words about the organization and the series. The organization I have the privilege of leading now is National Association of Japan-America Societies, and it's sort of described to me as an umbrella, but I see it more as a support base, maybe the galoshes, for this wonderful network of 38 independent Japan-America societies like Japan-America Society of Georgia, which are thriving across the United States for decades now. And we try to be supportive in a couple different ways by sourcing some of the themes and series and finding great speakers to share their knowledge, to line up generous supporters like the Embassy of Japan in this case to bring the resources we need and help networking so that these different societies can learn from one another. Today's program is actually part of the biggest series that NAJUS supports. There's about 8 programs that NAJUS has been running over recent years. This is Japan Currents series, and that's really just the waterfront of current events and topical issues like sustainability. But there are other programs out there that focus on the very rich military-to-military relationship, or what is really quite dynamic now, the geostrategic relationship between Japan and the United States. There's an arts program, which we're also supporting. So that is sort of the menu that we have to offer, and I'm looking forward to learning from the various societies to find out what else we can offer and how else we can be relevant and helpful. Personally, I come from a background where I've benefited a great deal from the Japan-America relationship. Like Jessica, I had an opportunity to go to Japan as a high schooler, so it's some 40 years now that I've been watching the relationship evolve. I can see how important it is, and comments such as Miho made about the differences in the relationship point out just how rich the synergies are. It's not just that we have a responsibility, but that we actually complement one another and have differing approaches to big thorny problems like climate change, for example. So I'm coming immediately from a background leading a business chamber in Taiwan, and I hope I can find some ways, for example, to bring that group and that set of synergies and approaches into our community. And I just want to again say thank you very much for this opportunity to join what has been a fantastic program, and I look forward to much more to come. Thanks very much.